Operation NBA Greed. The FBI with a massive gambling bust, including 3 hoopers involved in insider trading and rigged poker games. We'll tell you what happened, what it means, and what needs to change. I'm Doug Kezirian. This is Hard Pass, also available in podcast. So much for a banner opening week of the NBA season. Instead, the FBI busts a huge gambling operation, arresting and charging 3 well-known members of the NBA family. A current head coach, Chauncey Billups, who's already in the Hall of Fame for a playing career, a former player and assistant coach, Damon Jones, and then also a current player, Terry Rozier. It's all part of a massive federal investigation surrounding illegal gambling and with significant mafia ties. Plus, anytime gambling is involved, the very sanctity of the sport, the games, is called into question. So we'll get into all of it. I'll make sense of it all through 3 main areas: the details, the fallout, and the changes. But make no mistake, the common denominator with all of this, as is usually the case when laws are broken, greed. But it's everywhere. The number one area, the details, and it's about basic journalism, the who, what, where, when, and why, also known as the 5 W's. This FBI case is actually divided into 2 separate gambling investigations. One is about inside information surrounding sports betting. The other, rigged poker games. Again, sports and poker. In total, 34 people were arrested, including those 3 guys I mentioned through the NBA circles: Billups, Jones, and Rozier. The FBI investigation lasted a few years across 11 states and centered around tens of millions of dollars while involving 4 of the 5 Italian crime families known as La Cosa Nostra.
We will not allow this kind of illicit activity to happen, not only at the national sporting level, but also where it hides in La Cosa Nostra. And when these 2 collided together, they perpetrated a fraud that is historic in terms of not just money, but the scheme and the deceit that they utilize to steal and swindle people.
First, the NBA aspect of this, all about inside information. As head coach of the Blazers, Chauncey Billups allegedly informed shady cohorts that certain key players of his would not suit up for particular games well before the information was made public. This blatantly violates NBA rules and is essentially insider trading. This occurred near the end of the 2023 season when Portland decided to tank for the draft lottery by sitting some of their best players, including Damian Lillard, who was an all-star. By having that info before the sports books did, the bad actors could wager heavy amounts of money against the Blazers and at advantageous betting odds since they had the info before the market moved. Now, keep in mind, Billups is highly regarded as a great dude in NBA circles and made $107 million as a player and is currently making about $5 million annually as a head coach. Truly baffling, but that's just scratching the surface. Similar insider trading allegations for Damon Jones, who once played with LeBron and then was an unofficial part of the Lakers staff in the 2023-24 season. Being close to the team, Jones was thus privy to information and is accused of literally selling that information. That includes knowing LeBron would miss a game, and much like the Billups situation, if you know that LeBron won't play, you can lock in very favorable odds, such as the point spread, before the betting market adjusts. Again, insider trading. Greed won the face-off of emotions over caution and integrity.
I know Damon very well, played with Damon, so I don't want to sit up here, but I'm ashamed that those guys would put their families and their careers in jeopardy. There's an old saying in the hood, all money ain't good money. So if you're making $9 million and you're dealing in certain things, like how much more do you need? Especially if you know you get caught, you can do jail time, lose your career. put a bad image on yourself or your family or on the NBA.
And just to be clear, LeBron and other Lakers players and personnel had no knowledge of this, according to that FBI report. Billups and Jones, former players, but the third conspirator, Terry Rozier, was currently on the Heat at the time, and he took it further, which we had already heard. That's because the NBA had opened an investigation on him well before this. And this is video that's since surfaced, and it certainly looks shady. Rozier is accused of purposely removing himself from a game, faking an injury, and telling bad actors ahead of time. This inside info would have allowed them to organize a massive plan to wager on his own prop bets, which are bets you can make on an individual player's statistics. So if he's missing shots or committing turnovers, that would make specific wagers on certain stats become winning ones. They're known as unders, like under a certain stat threshold. Plus, those wagers would also win if he just removed himself from the game entirely early on, like in the first quarter. This is point shaving for prop bets.
The bets were placed through online sports books and also in person at casinos. The defendants relied on a network of straw bettors to place the maximum amount of bets to increase their potential profits. Most of these bets succeeded, and the intended losses were in the millions of dollars. The defendants then laundered their illegal winnings in various ways: peer-to-peer platforms, bank wires, and simple cash exchanges.
Again, the overarching theme here, greed across the board, given how much they were already making with their salaries. Now, we go to the illegal poker games. Again, sports and then poker. And this was well beyond elaborate. I'm talking something like a scam that felt like James Bond to the nth degree. The victims are high rollers, which is a term for people who gamble large amounts of money. They were invited to private poker games at various homes or buildings. As celebrities, Billups and Jones were used as bait to lure the high rollers to the games, and sort of known as fish, right? These high rollers were the fish, and Billups and Jones were known as face cards. Their involvement, their faces, their celebrity faces, also made the game seem more legitimate, but they were the complete opposite of that.
What the victims, the fish, didn't know is that everybody else at the poker game, from the dealer to the players, including the face cards, were in on the scam. Once the game was underway, the defendants fleeced the victims out of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars per game.
And like I said, a scam out of a James Bond movie. We are talking about marked cards, X-ray tables, special contact lenses or eyeglasses, shady shuffling machines, coordinated communication, including someone off-site that would gather the intel and then send it electronically to a player at the poker table, dubbed the quarterback. He would then signal other players at the table what cards each player had. Some nights were so egregious that Billups was told to win less because he was becoming too obvious. In fact, about 2 years ago on a podcast regarding cheating, professional gambler Matthew Berkey shared his encounter, or what he had heard in poker circuits involving a game with Billups.
It started in LA and then it came to Vegas for a few days, and it was all built around Chauncey Billups. And I had heard about the game, and the person who told me about it was like, "Look, I know the game runners. I'm telling you 100% this game is on the up and up." And I was like, "Well, I know a lot of the people that are involved, and I'm telling you 100% that it is not on the up and up."
Yeah.
And we kind of went back and forth, and I agreed that like I just wasn't going to go play it, but I had some friends who went and played it both in LA and in Vegas, and it obviously like was for sure confirmed to be cheated. Mm-hmm. Like people who clearly didn't even understand the rules of No Limit Hold'em are just like jamming hundreds of big blinds in with like a gutty. And then just drilling it. Yeah. Only the pros are losing.
Again, that was a podcast from a couple years ago that obviously resurfaced recently. Now, this was a giant scheme to dupe high rollers who wanted to play fair poker for big money, but a group of people conspired to cheat them out of millions. 4 of the Italian organized crime families were involved, and they used their clout and force to make sure those high rollers paid once they lost the poker games. Now, the second topic, the fallout. What does this mean for the NBA? Now, in a vacuum where you block out all the noise, it's not really a huge deal for the sanctity of the league. It's not a mainstream epidemic of fixed games. Frankly, in that regard, that 2007 scandal involving referee Tim Donaghy was way worse, again, because the games were compromised. Plus, the NBA has survived isolated criminal behavior in the past, such as players bringing handguns to the locker room and they end up in jail. It went away. NBA also is not the first company to have employees get arrested. And frankly, it's not really in regards to the product. Again, the games being compromised. But the optics are bad, and the timing isn't random given all the excitement surrounding the start of the regular season. In fact, ESPN's Stephen A. Smith thinks the president of the United States is retaliating to sports leagues that have openly criticized him and protested certain issues.
Trump is coming. He's coming. I'm going to say it on national television again. Bad Bunny is performing at the Super Bowl, and all of a sudden you hearing ICE is going to be there, looking to engage in mass deportations. The Super Bowl, disrupting things. Big night for the NBA. Wembanyama put on a show. That has now been smeared because we're talking about this story.
Stephen A. Smith, the sports commentator, suggested that this was revenge from the president for all the kind of left-wing activism of the NBA. Your response to that, 15 seconds.
I'm the FBI director. I decide which arrests to conduct and which not to conduct. That may be the single dumbest thing I've ever heard out of anyone in modern history, and I live most of my time in Washington, D.C. It's right up there with Adam Schiff. We arrest people for crimes.
So the FBI director explicitly shooting down that theory. And it's important to note, 3 NBA guys, really a small part of this whole thing compared to everyone that was arrested, including members of 4 Italian crime families. Now, the third component of this ordeal is change in terms of what this means for sports betting. To the untrained eye, I'm sure you've read it or heard it on TV or the radio, you got to shut it all down and stop with the betting commercials. But really, that's just misinformed and naive, in my opinion. I think that's actually the worst thing you can do. In fact, the FBI investigation could be a very good thing. Anytime there is change or evolution, you're going to break some eggs to make the omelet, okay? Make no mistake, a key reason this criminal behavior has been exposed and the FBI has caught everything is legalization. Sportsbooks want everything on the up and up, just like authorities do. They don't want fixed games. Sports betting has been around a long time. Heck, the World Series was thrown over a century ago, and sports betting will be here to the end of time as well, whether it's legalized or not. So the last thing people should want is for betting to go back underground and live in the gray area or the black area, right? The more things that are legally tracked with proper technology and communication between operators and authorities, the harder these types of things are to pull off. Now, think of other industries, right? Just to get some context, such as Wall Street, right? We didn't shut down the stock market when Bernie Madoff was arrested. Illegal trading exists and authorities exist to prevent it, okay? If someone is speeding on the highway, you penalize it, right? You don't shut down the highway. The FBI investigation probably already has a positive domino effect. I would imagine right now a lot of people are scared straight. I imagine certain athletes, if they're doing anything questionable, are probably reconsidering everything and not wanting to jeopardize their salaries and everything else that Shaq alluded to, right? However, I do think there should be some change. You can't just keep going. Betting space needs to evolve. The sports books need to stop with their greed because that's how this became an issue in the first place. What do I mean by that? The only reason the prop bets were made is because sports books were allowing huge limits in terms of the dollar amount, like $200,000 on a single prop bet at one sports book. That's absurd if you know anything about the betting space because most people can barely get down $1,000 on and even hundreds of dollars. However, this sophisticated operation figured out the loophole. Sportsbooks, like casinos, cater to big bettors. I mentioned high rollers. They're also known as whales. If a whale wants to make a certain type of bet, the operator will do almost anything to allow it, because if they don't, they'll lose that extremely valuable customer to a competitor. These whales are lifetime losers, and that's why the books treat them like royalty, offer them perks, concert tickets, Super Bowl tickets, you name it. They want their action. They want to keep them as a customer. So the last thing they're going to do is say no to a request. Again, these are lifetime losers. However, this is where the problem occurs. At some point, the whales become vulnerable because they've lost so much money over several years. And that's when the unethical piranhas, like the mob, pounce. They convince the whale to let them give them their account, and they'll split some of the profits. And they'll bet big on something that's fixed. Now, the sportsbook won't know someone else is using the account. They'll just think it's the whale betting big on something, right? Only sometimes does the sportsbook even realize what happened. So the sportsbooks need to coordinate with one another and determine whether they're going to allow this type of action. Because if they take it away, the limits are lowered, these bad actors aren't going to see enough profit to go do such type of illegal activity. So it's all about curbing the allure of it all. Again, everyone needs to check their greed, so to speak. Let me know what you think. Join the conversation, weigh in, let me know your thoughts. Would love to hear your reaction to it all and what you think needs to change as well.